We'll just do some very quick introductions so that you know who's in the room. I'm David Durfee. I'm chair of the committee. I'm from Shaftesbury, down in Bennington County. And let's just go around this way.
Hi, Heather Supernaut, Windsor 4, Barnard, Pomfret, Bridgewater, West Hartford.
Hi, John O'Brien. I represent Windsor Orange 1. That's Royalton and my hometown, Tunbridge.
Craig Burt, from Cabot, representing Cabot, Danville, and Peacham.
Michelle Boslin, Wyndham 3, Westminster, Rockingham, and Brookline in northern Wyndham County.
Richard Nelson, Orleans 1, Derby.
I'm Leland Morgan. I represent all of Grand Isle County and a portion of the town of Milton.
Great, thank you. So we'll turn it right over to you. I don't know who wants to speak first. And if you could just introduce yourselves for the record and we'll get going.
Certainly, I'll kick it off. And so my name is Julia Rell. I am one of 2 deputy commissioners at the Health Department. The Division of Environmental Health, where the Food and Lodging Program sits, is under me in the Health Department. And I am filling in for the commissioner who is taking a well-deserved vacation before he retires. So sorry you won't have an opportunity to hear from him today, but happy to be here representing the department along with Liz Wurzing. So we heard during this morning's walkthrough that the committee had a number of questions about the current licensing program and how it operates. And we want to take this opportunity to provide some background about the program and also to begin a discussion about how we can work together to understand the impacts on and supports needed for small operators. The current licensing framework was drafted by the legislature, the department, and partners many years ago and reflected the operations and licensing approach at that time. Over the years, the statutory and regulatory structure has been modified in a very piecemeal fashion, so many times that it is inconsistent and unclear. I think you saw some of that this morning. The department also acknowledges that the current structure of the food manufacturing fees doesn't reflect inflation or the current marketplace. We do believe that a more comprehensive review is needed, and we welcome an opportunity to engage in a discussion with the bill advocates and Vermont small businesses about revising fees and exemptions for food manufacturers in the coming months. As part of these discussions, we think it's really critical to consider the potential public health impacts of exemptions from licensure and inspection. Not all foods are created equal when it comes to public health risks. When larger manufacturers are exempt from licensure and inspection, more products are put out into the marketplace without inspection, oversight, and guidance. And there is a greater risk to public health. I'm going to turn it over to Liz now.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Arel. My name is Liz Wurzing. I'm the Director of the Food and Lodging Program in our Division of Environmental Health. I'm going to provide some background about some of the licensing categories that you've been asking some questions about. So home bakers are typically producing baked goods such as breads, cookies, and muffins in their home using their domestic home kitchen equipment. There is currently a licensing exemption for home bakeries with an average gross retail sales that do not exceed $125 per week, and that's about $6,500 per year. Separately, there are currently 109 licensed home bakeries in Vermont with unknown gross annual sales that are currently licensed and inspected. So these establishments do receive support and technical assistance from the department. With proper food handling techniques, these home bakers are considered small-scale, low-risk producers. And they're considered low risk because the step of baking kills pathogens and microorganisms like bacteria. Most of the bakery items that are being produced have low water activity and high sugar, which present conditions that decrease the ability of microorganisms to grow. So because of these conditions, baked goods usually don't require temperature control, such as refrigeration, making them more shelf stable and non-perishable. Currently, if home bakeries are operating under the exemption, they do not receive technical assistance or inspection from the health department. You had some questions about small and large commercial bakeries. So these are commercial operations that typically operate on a larger scale than the home producers. Small commercial bakery operations produce bakery items in a commercial establishment, such as a store, using a single oven or a commercial donut machine or a kettle for retail sale. The large commercial bakery operators manufacture bakery products for retail and often wholesale. They operate using rotary ovens, peel ovens, which is quite a dated term in the statute or in prior regulation, and other commercial bakery equipment. And they also may use delivery trucks and ship products interstate. So neither category is determined by annual gross receipts because the department does not collect information on gross receipts. Under the current law, there are no licensing exemptions for these types of commercial baking facilities or other commercial facilities. Switching to food processing, food manufacturers in Vermont include makers of kimchi products, salsa, hot sauces, mustards, and other sauces, and some more innovative products that we've seen more recently, like fermented cashew cheese. These products are often sold in retail stores and may be distributed into the out-of-state markets, so they very much represent the Vermont producers. And our concern is if improperly canned, preserved, fermented, if temperature control is not maintained or the pH not controlled, these products can make people very sick, sometimes requiring hospitalization. And specific to these manufacturers, the serious foodborne illnesses of concern would be salmonellosis, listeriosis, and botulism as the primary risks. And you may know botulism is a rare but potentially fatal illness where bacteria attack the body's nerves and it may cause difficulty breathing, muscle paralysis, and even death. Common sources of botulism are homemade foods that have been improperly canned, preserved, or fermented. And while we fortunately have not had cases of foodborne botulism in Vermont, we do have an annual average of 3 cases every year of listeriosis. There were 5 cases reported in 2024, more than 100 cases of salmonellosis annually, and more than 200 cases of campylobacteriosis annually. Food manufacturers that are currently claiming the exemption are very small businesses selling products from their homes, often at farmers markets and in some cases in retail stores. For some, we know this might be their first venture into starting a food business. For others, this is a weekend hobby or a source of extra income. Regardless of the background of the manufacturer, we want to support these businesses because the public purchasing these products at events, in stores, and online assumes that the products are regulated and safe to consume. Operators producing food products under an exemption are required in the Department of Health's Manufactured Food Rule, Section 6.2.1, to label food products with the name of the producer, the name of the product, ingredients, allergen information, and a statement made in a home kitchen not inspected by the Vermont Department of Health. And we know this is information that consumers are interested in. For small businesses, food safety education provided during the licensing and inspection process is valuable for ensuring production of a safe product. So working with the health department may be the only food safety education provided to some of these very small starting producers. Our program staff work with prospective businesses to evaluate compliance with licensing requirements prior to operation. This might look like a preliminary inspection being conducted at a business. It's consultative and educational. It provides feedback and includes a walkthrough of a facility to evaluate equipment, the operational flow of the business, reviewing menus or product lists, process steps, and provides food safety education where needed. So this service is beneficial to businesses and also to the department as it results in increased compliance and faster licensing. We do know and feel strongly that food safety inspections are a preventive public health service, and the program's goal is to prevent illness, injury, and death from foodborne illness and some of these food safety hazards. Inspections can identify food safety risks and prevent foodborne illness. For this group that you're interested in of food manufacturers with $10,000 to $50,000 annual gross sales, there are currently 86 licensed businesses. And currently, the food manufacturers with gross receipts of $10,000 or less are not required to obtain a license or pay a licensing fee, and they're not routinely inspected. They do not receive technical assistance from the department. These food manufacturers claiming the exemption are required to notify the department by filing a form, which can now be done online and comply with the manufactured food rules. The license fees help to offset the costs of the department working with a business, conducting inspections, and providing regulatory services. The health department is not able to provide these services without the license fees that support them. We had a request, transitioning to talking about data for a minute. We had a request for some data, inspection data for some of these license categories of interest. And the data do demonstrate that food safety violations are identified during inspections of licensed businesses. So some highlights for food processor license category $10,000 to $50,000 inspections. For fiscal year 22 through 24, the inspections found that 22% of those inspections had physical plant and ground violations. 18% of inspections had violations of sanitary facilities and controls. 11% of inspections had sanitary operations violations. Looking specifically at the licensed home bakery inspections for fiscal year 22 through 24, the inspections found 30% of inspections with violations regarding thermometers or chemical test kits for sanitizers. 11% of inspections with violations of facilities to maintain product temperatures. 10% of inspections with toilet and hand washing facility violations, and 8% of inspections with chemical storage violations. And we can submit this data to the committee if that'd be helpful. So summarizing, increasing the fee exemption for commercial bakers and food manufacturers reduces the resources available for regulating all food manufacturers, from licensing and inspections to providing technical support to licensees and non-licensed establishments. Because current license fees do not cover the cost of administering the program, the exemption changes proposed in the bill would increase reliance on the general fund to support this regulatory program. And such decreases impair the department's ability to ensure that all manufacturers are operating in a manner that protects the public health. Currently, if establishments are exempt, the department does not provide inspection services or support to non-licensed establishments. These services are important for a variety of reasons, including the prevention of foodborne illness and injury before those events occur. And our concern would be small operators may lack access to food safety information. We'd also suggest there are alternative ways of setting tiers of food manufacturer licensure and regulations that also may be more beneficial for Vermont small businesses and also ensure public health. Some states, for example, base licensing fees and oversight on the products being manufactured rather than on gross receipts. And from a public health perspective, the department does not consider all food manufacturers to be low risk. So this might be an option for looking at this differently. If fee structures and exemptions are based on annual gross receipts, the department's current licensing systems do not require establishments to submit gross receipt or tax information to verify the fee schedule. And the department would have concerns about establishments submitting this information or placing responsibility on the department for verifying annual gross receipts in the licensing program. So in summary, the department welcomes the opportunity to engage in a discussion with the bill advocates and Vermont small businesses about ideas for revising fees and exemptions for food manufacturers and the best way to structure food manufacturing licensure and regulation moving forward. And I'll stop there.
All right, thank you, Liz. And Deputy Commissioner Earl, thank you as well. I don't know how much time you have. I know we had originally slotted you from 3:30 to 4 and you got started a little bit late. Do you have a few minutes for questions? Okay.
Yes, we do.
I just wanted to start by asking if you can tell us about the distinction between in a non-bakery setting between a small operator, an unlicensed operator who's not paying a fee, and then someone who does pay a fee. What other than the monetary cutoff, is there something else that happens when you are no longer qualifying? And I'm asking partly because of testimony we heard this earlier today about the need to install additional equipment.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think what we typically see is very small producers might start operating in their home under the food processor licensing exemption for $10,000 a year. And as they decide that they want to continue the business or it starts to grow, it starts to take off, they may need to move into a commercial facility and have sales larger than $10,000. So that is one of the distinctions. The food processor licensing does require a commercial facility in order to be in compliance with the Good Manufacturing Practices regulations, which is now the preventive controls for human food regulations.
So if we were to the bill is proposes increasing from $10,000 essentially to $30,000, the threshold. Aside, if that were the only change that were made under current statute, would there still be a need to move into a commercial kitchen setting once you reach $10,000, or is that unclear in the statute?
So the department, it would be challenging for an operator to become licensed if they were not in a commercial facility for the food processor. So I think there are implications to increasing it. We also, would want to look at the public health impacts and concerns with the type of operator it is. So you've likely noticed and been discussing that besides the monetary exemption, there's no other guardrails on this licensing category in terms of what types of products can be produced or made in that licensing category. So that's something we would consider discussing with you. It's an approach other states have taken to try to ensure that there are some food safety considerations beyond just a monetary exemption.
Representative Burt?
Yeah, I guess I'll skip to one of my questions out of interest of time. Do you have data on, you mentioned the number, I didn't catch all the different categories, but you mentioned the number of cases last year due to foodborne illnesses due to food manufacturers. Do you know what type of manufacturers those illnesses came from?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So the health department does have a reportable disease system, right? So folks that are diagnosed with an illness through their provider, through a laboratory confirmation, are required to be reported to the health department by law. So we have a whole surveillance program for monitoring those infectious diseases. The department interviews reportable disease cases, and a lot of foodborne illness might look like sporadic cases that are reported to the department. But each case is interviewed, and people often report, you do a meal history. So people often report places that they might have eaten products or places that they may have gone. Unless it is an outbreak with multiple matched cases, it's often challenging to pinpoint a direct cause of a foodborne illness. But we can tell you that we have, since 2019, have had 4 outbreak investigations that were linked to unregulated food products or events. So this included a salmonella outbreak linked to a community event where there were 2 confirmed salmonella cases and 14 suspected cases. We had another salmonella outbreak linked to a homemade dinner that had 3 total cases, a Campylobacter outbreak linked to a tourism destination served meal, also unregulated though, not a licensed facility, with 10 cases, and the Cyclospora outbreak linked to a community event with 9 cases. So there are outbreak investigations happening and sporadic foodborne illness cases being investigated frequently, but sometimes rising to the level of an outbreak investigation is required in order to really pinpoint a very specific cause, like a home food producer, if that helps answer your question.
Yeah, if I could ask just one more follow-up question to that, how does that compare to, I'm trying to think, because I know the number of meals or amount of food that's being produced out of a home bakery or food manufacturer is obviously, it's a small segment of the amount in our entire state being produced. Is there a ratio that's available for like how many outbreaks per establishment, home manufactured establishment versus number of outbreaks per commercial establishment, like to see if there's a significant statistical difference between whether or not it's manufactured in a home or whether or not it was manufactured in a commercial space?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. We know foodborne illness reporting is really just the tip of the iceberg. The cases that make it through the reportable disease system is just the very tip. So that we know there's a lot more underlying illness below. And I think what I'd say to you is the goal here is prevention. It's really hard to count prevented illness, right? So food safety is all about foodborne illness is a preventable disease. And a lot of these systems in place are to try to prevent events from even happening. So when the system is working well, we don't pick up on those types of issues.
Representative Boslin.
Yeah, so when you were talking about food manufacturers, all the examples you gave were things like salsa or kimchi, which presumably are going to be canned and shelf stable. I'm wondering about, there was a woman at a farmer's market that in my town that would make a vegetarian soup or stew every week. That's not going to have salmonella almost for sure. It's super hot. Would she still need to get a license to be a food manufacturer for something like that? Or is this only for like canned products that you're going to be selling and taking away from the sales spot?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So we do work and license a variety of types of food producers, especially at farmers markets.
Yeah.
And that sounds like it might be a home caterer, which is a licensed establishment. So there's a lot of food safety considerations, right? For preparing a soup ahead of the market, cooling it down, storing it in your house, transporting it to the market, reheating it, and providing it to the consumer, right? So that that does have licensing requirements with the health department and inspection. And also a lot of the farmers market vendors, if they are preparing food at the market, they may also be licensed as temporary event vendors. So there's a whole retail side of the program that I didn't speak too much to today, that includes a large volume of licensed producers, including some of those home producers like the community member you mentioned.
So that wouldn't count under the food manufacturing. If she sells less than $10,000, she's exempt, or anybody would be.
If she's providing soup at a farmer's market, that
Yeah.
does require licensing. Yeah, it's a different, it's a food service activity.
Thanks.
And I'll
Representative
mention,
O'Brien.
we do work regularly, provide some outreach to NOFA, to the farmers market managers, and try to just provide information about licensing requirements and food safety. That's one of our partners.
Representative O'Brien.
Liz, you mentioned, was it 109 licensed home bakeries, and those are under that 10,000. So are those bakeries that got in touch with you and said, we think we're exempt, but we want you to know that we're doing this at home? And so I wonder, is there another whole population who just never get in touch, who sell, the neighbors wherever, but they stay away for whatever reason from the Department of Health?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So the 109 home bakers are licensed home bakers with unknown gross sales. So we don't know if they're under $10,000 in sales. And you're right. So there's exempt home bakers under $6,500, or you can be a licensed home baker. And then after that, people usually who are much larger, they move into commercial facilities or use food hubs and kind of tool their business on a commercial scale.
So what's the license involved? It's voluntary sign up?
It's an application process with a regulatory inspection, and there's compliance elements for obtaining the license. So it's part of the licensing regulatory structure.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And Liz, just to clarify, in the case of a licensed home baker doesn't necessarily need to have a full-scale commercial kitchen.
That is correct. So licensed home baker is in the domestic home kitchen, and that is allowable in the regulation.
So that's a distinction between a bakery and a non-bakery, that once you getting a license doesn't necessarily trigger additional equipment requirements.
So we do have, Vermont for many years has had some of these home-based licensing categories that do allow very small scale production using domestic home equipment where it's been appropriate.
Representative Nelson.
Thank you. So someone that makes pies and they make 15 pies a week, they're gonna be over that $125 a week thing, I imagine, if their pies are good.
Really good, yeah.
So do you see that we have room to raise the limits, to raise the 125 or raise the 10,000? Because it costs more to procure eggs and whatnot, and, you know, we're trying to facilitate this, you know, regional feeding program.
Right.
And,
Yep.
you know, is there a number that doesn't make you people get squeamish over there? You know,
Yeah.
you know, it's been proposed to raise it to 30,000.
Correct. Yeah, I think we would be really interested in talking with you more about that, especially as you know, the home bakeries are lower risk activities in terms of public health. So, and you're right, I don't know how much a pie goes for these days, but as Deputy Commissioner Arel mentioned, we recognize that the times are different now, and it would be good to look at this comprehensively.
I just had a couple of quick clarifying questions.
Sure.
You earlier, Liz, I think you mentioned some percentages of inspections that resulted in certain infractions. And so I've got a series of questions related to that. Do you inspect everybody annually?
The inspection frequencies are actually based on risk. So we might inspect a full-scale restaurant more frequently than a home baker, but they are between 12 and 24 months inspection frequency.
And those infractions that you described, do you categorize them? Maybe this is also by risk as major and minor. Are there some infractions that are more serious than others?
Yeah, that's a great question. Definitely. So things like not having proper facilities to maintain product temperature, that means the refrigerator, there was an issue with the refrigerator where you stored your butter, cream, and milk to make your pie, right? Things about temperature control, things about chemical storage, things about hand washing and hygiene are always of concern to us. And yes, the regulatory language does include items that are more important or more concerning to food safety than, for example, the floors are dirty and it, you know, and there's a, while disturbing, a hair in a pie is not going to jump out of the chair for us. So yes, there are different types of violations.
And then they sort of following up on Representative Burt's question from earlier, is the likelihood or incidence of violations for this category of small producers any different than you might find with restaurants or other restaurants or caterers or other food service establishments?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. We did look at some of the categories within the same group, right, of the data that was requested, and the percentages are similar within that group, but I did not compare it to restaurants. And I think operationally those can be quite different, right, with the types of activities they're doing, the types of equipment being used. Sometimes there's specialized processing happening, like reduced oxygen packaging or curing foods. So it is a kind of a different animal, but in general, the food safety items of concern around the risk factors that we know can contribute to foodborne illness would still be of concern, and that is things like improper cooking, improper holding temperatures, so cooling and heating, contaminated equipment, and then the employee health and hygiene, right? So people working while they're sick, people not washing hands, things that might be transferred over to consumers. Those are kind of the main focus areas, but there's in retail, it's a 44 item inspection. So there's a lot of things that are evaluated.
I have one other question, but I'm going to hold it and let Representative Balzan go.
Yeah, so this is just a quick one. So it sounds like in terms of the least controversial aspect of what you monitor, bakeries are the lowest risk. And so like in terms of the question that Representative Nelson asked about, you know, pies, and I mean, next to me is somebody that runs an apple orchard and he sells pies, and he said $20 for a pie. So like,
yeah.
that's not, so you sell 7 pies, then, suddenly you've exceeded and you're gonna be bumped into another category. And even somebody who's a very casual seller who goes to the farmer's market, I would hope they would sell more than 7 pies or cookies or whatever it was. So I guess
Yep.
I'm wondering, if we were only gonna tackle part of this that's less complicated, would it make sense for us to look at raising the increase on the amount of baked goods that somebody could sell in terms of the value? And then maybe looking at the other part of it at a later time? Would that feel less controversial for you folks?
The bakery items are lower risk. The home-based producers are the smallest. And I think we'd like to talk more with you about that.
So I'm just going to wrap up with a thought and then an observation. First of all, we are always happy to talk more. And to be perfectly fair, we had the walkthrough of this bill this morning. And that was not our, we didn't choose the timing. The bill just appeared. And then we had a week where, as you know, we were off, and then we weren't able to get the walkthrough until today. And we have a couple of deadlines coming up, as you probably also know. So we are, if the committee decides to move ahead with the bill, either in its current form or with some changes, we have until Friday to do that. But it would then go into the Ways and Means Committee. There's a week reprieve because it deals with revenue. And our friends across the hall from our committee here in Human Services would have an opportunity then to do some additional work.
Mm-hmm.
To be honest, a week is not a whole lot of time to do much additional work. But that's not the end of the line. Obviously, the bill would need to cross several other people's desks before anything happened. I am just going to say, though, that we are, I think, looking at this as there's some cleaning up that needs to be done in the statute. I think everybody agrees, regardless of the dollar amounts. But the fact is that we've had these numbers in place for a number of years. I'm not sure that we've got testimony on whether it's 8 years or some larger number, but I think at least 8 years. And we've been working with those. There hasn't been, as far as I'm aware anyway, any loud objection to the existing structure, which did allow a lot more people to fall under that minimum than it does today. And we're thinking, we can not cause a whole lot more harm by bringing it back to the situation it was 7 or 8 years ago, at the very least. In terms of the way inflation has affected things. So I think if there's evidence out there to say that was a problem 8 years ago and it wasn't being addressed, that would be good for maybe our friends across the hall to know. But in the meantime, if there's some changes we can make in the next 48 hours or so here in our committee, we're happy to hear more. Did anybody else have any other questions, or maybe if you have any other final comments? Health Department folks.
I just had one quick.
Representative O'Brien.
Are inspections scheduled or surprise, sort of softly scheduled? How does that work?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. So opening inspections and preliminary consultations are all scheduled. That works best for the business. Once a business is licensed, a routine inspection is unannounced. So the inspectors will arrive during business hours, right, and conduct those routine inspections. And then we may also receive complaints from the public or have an investigation, and those usually also are unannounced.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us today. Really appreciate it. And we'll be in touch.
Thank you
Thanks
so
for your
much for
interest.
having us.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Now, let me see before we go anywhere. Do we have businesses who are waiting in the Zoom room or might want to?
There was Carol.
Yeah, Caroline, I think is. There she is. Caroline, welcome back.
Hi. Hello, thank you so much for having me back.
So I'm just going to say we're at the end of a long day, a lot of sitting. But if you want to share any thoughts on H401, we would like to hear them.
Yeah, and thank you so much for the opportunity to speak about that bill on such a long day. And yeah, you all hang in there, as this is going to be a really tiring, long week for you all. So I'll keep my piece really short here. Just it was kind of an honor to be able to be present and listen through, of course, the Department of Health testimony just now, and from hearing from both Julie and Elizabeth, this clear open door of wanting to speak to advocates about the bill and about the idea to raise income thresholds. And sure, if this succeeds to move to the Senate, we'd be excited to discuss all this with them directly more as well. And just quick response, I think that the most interesting aspect of the testimony was, of course, the data on health concerns raised from either of the categories of cottage foods. And I'm not sure, of course, I'm not the expert here, but what I heard was that there was like 4 cases total since 2014. I'm not sure if that's exactly correct, but that's what I wrote down in my envelope back notes here. And what I heard is that all the 4 examples altogether were all like cases from the catering tier of those types of existing tiers of cottage food producers. And the interesting fact about that is that those are actually, of all the 3 categories, the only category that is already getting a license from the Department of Health and that is receiving all the technical assistance. So of course, that's raising questions in terms of how effective that technical assistance might really be. But it's on the other side, really great to hear that the 2 other categories, home bakers and as well as food manufacturers, have apparently not been subject to any of those cases. And as far as I read H401, that's what this bill is proposing, those exempt categories in their tiers of 10,000 for the home food manufacturers and then 6,500 for the bakers, to raise those thresholds to according to the inflation more or less to like be now like a 30,000 as a new tier, to be a little bit more appropriate for the reasons discussed in this testimony. And I really appreciate all the questions. So that seems to be in terms of what is the takeaway from that testimony, not the red light at all, but an open door, and that's great to hear. I think we could also totally get behind like any guidelines if they're not in existence. I don't know that for those tiers that are exempt in terms of how to do it well. Any resources of public education, I think, as we're thinking about enhancing our local self-reliance and incentivizing that even, I think anything that comes from the department might be really well received in the sphere of the public and those who are those producers. Yeah, and then just my little spiel. So we're in favor of this bill. This is one of our board priorities. We have members reaching out to us with an interest in increasing these income gaps. I'm sorry that neither of our members could join us today. This was like very last minute, and I did reach out to some of them, and I did get some feedback. Just that they're cheering this on, and that they're sorry they can't make it this spontaneously. Some bakers, but also like one of our former board members is like a vinegar producer. And they said in terms of making vinegar, this is really burdensome to scaling up in their home kitchen with doing that. And, vinegar is a really safe food product too. I think the department didn't lose too many words on that tier, but also a takeaway there. It doesn't seem like anyone got sick from sauerkraut or vinegar, but that it was like the bean soup that stood out too long, but that is not the thing that's addressed in the H401 right now. Yeah, so no, this would be a great step in the right direction. If this could move to the Senate, obviously there's more to work on. I think it would be great to look just what neighboring states are doing. I'm really not an expert on this topic, but there's this, others are. So just going to point to another nonprofit that works on this more. That's the Institute for Justice. They have like a state-by-state comparison of cottage food laws across the country. And just from their online resources, it seems like Massachusetts, New York, Maine, and New Hampshire, all our neighboring states, might have no income gaps or, more flexibility for those tiers of cottage food producers. And yeah, again, I'm not the expert, but I'm just going to share with Linda a link to that resources for you all to consider yourselves as you're considering this legislation. So thank you so much for hearing from me today on that.
Great, thanks, Caroline. And Sidonia, you want to send it to?
Right, sorry about that.
Yeah, I heard you say Linda. So. All right. That's the end of our testimony. Anybody have anything you want to toss out while we're thinking about it while it's fresh? Okay.
A couple things that I think who is the woman that from Ledge Council that crafted this bill?
So that's Katie.
Katie, yeah.
Yeah.
Could we ask her to possibly give a potential leaned up draft? She kind of admitted that there were some numbers there that needed some tweaking. Or when would you go back? Obviously, we don't have much time, so we can get it up like for tomorrow.
So the one thing that was in error in the draft, I think, was 50,000. It should have been 30,000.
Mm-hmm.
So we can certainly take care of that. Yeah. And I think if we're going to have her come in, what I would like to do is give her any other direction so that we can say specifically and hear things that the committee would like to try and do.
Did the bill address raising the level on bakery items too or not? I don't remember
Yeah.
that.
Bakery?
What did it raise it to?
It was 30 in both cases.
Oh, okay, so just raise it that flat.
Does it change the fee structure at all?
So the one thing it does is it collapsed there were two tiers of fees in the non-bakery area, and it just makes one. Does not, and I don't think it raised, I don't think it did anything to the bakery. It didn't raise anything to the bakery. I know that.
The fees are almost nominal.
I know, yeah, but there was two different fee structures, one for bakeries and one for food manufacturers. It seems like that one fee structure for both. I mean, come on, like how many
It sounds like there's more things they measure for the food manufacturers in terms of like refrigerator and.
Yeah, maybe that's. I don't know.
They were gonna get rid of the 10 to 50 group, right?
Yeah. So it eliminates it goes from two tiers to one, and then the fee for both would be the 275, which is the existing higher fee. And then the fee for a home bakery is 100. And I don't know that we heard, and that sort of makes sense. That maybe somebody did say that. I don't know if we heard that was the explanation, but.
I just had an observation.
Yeah.
I mean, from my personal experience in life and seeing testimony from the health department, when we asked if they are, if 30,000 is a better number, they really can't, in their position that they're in as their job, can't advocate for potential. They can't advocate for, let's increase the potential health risk in their mind. So they're not going to say yes. That's just not going to happen. So I don't think we need to hear that in order to say, okay, we can go forward with this.
Yeah.
They really can't. It's a hat. It's the one hat that they wear. So.
I think one thing that was interesting that we heard from the department is that they aren't able to provide technical assistance right now to the unlicensed group of people they don't know about at all, even if they're and maybe some people who are unlicensed that they know about, but in either case, their work is funded by fees that they collect. And so they're already not collecting enough money to visit people they are regulating. So, this would come out of the general fund was a point that they made. And I think that's good to know.
I just think it's strange that whether a place is inspected or not is based on money, how much is sold, rather than is it safe or not,
What they sell.
and what they sell. So if I only sell a little, I don't get inspected. But so a lot, I get inspected. It just seems that no matter what you sell, you would want somebody to at least monitor it at some point, I would think. But
They say other states do it by category of what sort of risk assessment category, I take it.
I
So
don't,
bakeries are safer in general, right? Food processors.
bakeries are safer in general. Yeah, I don't know what we heard about other states. We heard, and
Florida has a $250,000 limit.
yeah,
The home producer.
we heard that this morning. Yeah. Caroline, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, just about that point, I think that's exactly why the Vermont system is differentiating already in 3 different tiers among 3 different types of cottage foods, with, you know, clearly that point being well made by the Department of Health that per se baked good is already pretty safe. So it has its own category, and this is an exempt tier in that category. The catering tier is not. It has to be licensed. And then the food manufacturing, okay, what is that? When we think about it from an agricultural stance, you know, agricultural products are perishable. So they have to be salted, pickled, to sweet. Like there's these different types of canned, fermented, different types of procedures to preserve those foods, to be able to sell them retail in a stable way, and those types of processing are also pretty safe. I can't, of course, say that with the authority of the Department of Health, but I'm just saying there's a reason why there's also in that tier that's different from the food catering tier, a exempt tier.
Okay, well, let's think about this between now and tomorrow morning. And we'll take the conversation up again. We're meeting at 9, by the way. We've got the same topics will be on our agenda tomorrow that we had. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.